Have you ever noticed how the harder you try to stop living on autopilot, the more elusive conscious living becomes? There's a reason for this, and once you see it, everything shifts. Let me show you what I mean. Most people approach breaking autopilot like they're trying to manually control every breath, every heartbeat, every muscle movement. They exhaust themselves attempting to be consciously aware of every moment, every decision, every response. But what if I told you that this very effort to control and monitor everything is actually what keeps you trapped in unconscious patterns? The people who effortlessly live with intention and awareness know something that the rest of us are missing. It's not about constant vigilance or forcing consciousness into every moment. It's definitely not what they teach in mindfulness courses or productivity systems. Stay with me, because this understanding will transform not just how you experience your daily life, but how you relate to consciousness itself. There's something profound that happens when we truly understand autopilot. Not the surface-level awareness most people try to cultivate, but the deeper truth that changes everything. What I'm about to share might feel uncomfortable at first, then liberating, and finally transformative. Because here's what most people miss. Autopilot isn't your enemy. It's your mind's most sophisticated tool for navigating complexity. And when you understand how to work with it rather than against it, breaking free from unconscious living becomes as natural as waking up from a dream. The prison. Have you noticed how breaking free from autopilot feels like trying to escape from a room with no visible doors? There's something happening beneath the surface that most of us miss because we're focused on fighting against unconscious patterns instead of understanding why they exist in the first place. Picture Sarah, a marketing executive who realized one Thursday afternoon that she couldn't remember her drive to work, what she'd eaten for lunch, or even the details of the 3 meetings she just attended. She was living her life, but not really experiencing it. Everything felt automatic, routine, disconnected. She was going through the motions of a successful life while feeling increasingly empty and purposeless inside. Sound familiar? Sarah represents millions of us caught in what I call the awareness trap. We become so concerned about our lack of consciousness that we create elaborate systems to force awareness, monitor our thoughts, and manually control our responses. We set phone alarms to remind us to be present, practice intensive mindfulness techniques, and exhaust ourselves trying to be consciously aware of every moment. But here's the problem with this approach. The harder you try to force consciousness, the more mental energy you consume, leaving even less capacity for natural awareness. It's like trying to fall asleep by concentrating intensely on sleeping. The effort itself becomes the obstacle. Sarah tried everything: morning meditation, mindfulness apps, hourly check-ins with herself, journaling about her level of awareness. For a few days, she felt more conscious and present. But soon, monitoring her consciousness became another automatic routine. She was unconsciously trying to be conscious, which created a strange layer of meta-autopilot that felt even more disconnected than her original unconsciousness. What Sarah didn't understand, what most of us miss, is that autopilot exists for brilliant reasons. Your mind developed these automatic patterns to handle routine tasks efficiently while preserving mental energy for important decisions and new challenges. Autopilot isn't a malfunction of consciousness, it's a feature of human intelligence that allows you to navigate complex life without constant deliberate effort. The problem isn't that autopilot exists. The problem is when autopilot becomes the default mode for areas of life that deserve conscious attention. When you're automatically responding to your children, automatically making career decisions, automatically moving through relationships without real presence or choice. Think of how a skilled driver navigates familiar roads. They don't consciously think about every steering adjustment, every pressure on the pedal, every glance in the mirror. These actions happen automatically, freeing their conscious attention for navigation, conversation, or appreciating the scenery. This is autopilot functioning perfectly, handling routine complexities while preserving awareness for what matters most. But imagine if that same driver automatically chose their destination, automatically decided where to stop, automatically determined who to visit, all without conscious input. The automatic driving skills that were once helpful would now be problematic because they're operating in areas that require conscious choice and intention. This is exactly what happens in life. Autopilot expands beyond its useful domain and begins making decisions about relationships, career direction, daily priorities, and life purpose. You find yourself automatically saying yes to commitments you don't want, automatically reacting to stress in ways that don't serve you, automatically moving through days without conscious choice about how you want to spend your limited time and energy. Most people try to solve this by fighting against all automatic functioning, which is both impossible and counterproductive. Your mind needs autopilot to function efficiently. The solution isn't eliminating automatic responses, it's learning to consciously choose which areas of life operate automatically and which require deliberate awareness and intention. You might be thinking, but I've tried to be more intentional. I've set goals, made plans, practiced mindfulness. Why do I keep slipping back into unconscious patterns? That's exactly the right question, because what I'm about to share isn't another technique for forced awareness. It's an understanding that makes conscious living feel natural and sustainable rather than exhausting and artificial. The real challenge isn't developing more discipline to stay conscious. It's learning to work with your mind's natural intelligence in a way that supports both efficient automatic functioning and conscious choice in the areas that matter most. When you understand this balance, breaking autopilot stops feeling like constant effort and starts feeling like coming alive to your own life. The understanding. Here's what transforms everything about breaking autopilot. Consciousness isn't something you force or maintain through effort. It's your natural state that emerges when you remove the obstacles that are blocking your inherent awareness and create the conditions that support natural presence. Let me tell you about David, a software engineer who spent years trying to break his autopilot patterns through willpower and monitoring systems. He'd set reminders to check in with himself, practice meditation to increase awareness, and even wore a bracelet that vibrated hourly to prompt conscious presence. Despite all this effort, he still felt like he was sleepwalking through most of his life. Then something shifted during a weekend hiking trip. Without any apps, reminders, or deliberate mindfulness practices, David found himself naturally present and aware. He noticed the changing light, felt genuinely connected to his hiking companion's conversation, made conscious choices about pace and direction. The awareness he'd been struggling to force in his daily life was happening effortlessly in this different environment. This experience made David curious about what conditions supported his natural consciousness versus what interfered with it. He began experimenting with different environments, schedules, and activities, paying attention to when awareness felt natural versus when it felt forced. What David discovered was revolutionary. His consciousness wasn't broken or deficient, it was being suppressed by conditions that worked against his natural awareness rhythms. Overstimulation, rushing, multitasking, and constant digital input were creating mental noise that made natural presence nearly impossible. When he adjusted these conditions rather than trying to force awareness through willpower, consciousness began emerging naturally. This reveals the deeper principle that transforms everything. Your mind naturally wants to be conscious and present. Autopilot becomes problematic not because consciousness is difficult, but because modern life often creates conditions that make natural awareness challenging to maintain. While most people exhaust themselves trying to force consciousness through discipline and monitoring, master practitioners understand that sustainable awareness emerges from creating optimal conditions for your mind's natural intelligence to function clearly. Just as plants grow naturally when they have the right soil, water, and light, consciousness flows naturally when it has the right internal and external conditions. Think of how a clear mountain lake naturally reflects the sky and surrounding landscape perfectly. The lake doesn't try to create this reflection, it simply maintains the conditions that allow reflection to happen naturally. When the water is still and clear, reflection occurs effortlessly. When the water is choppy or muddy, reflection becomes distorted or impossible.
Your consciousness works the same way. When your mental environment is calm and clear, awareness naturally reflects reality accurately and completely. When your mental environment is chaotic or cluttered, awareness becomes fragmented and autopilot takes over to handle the overload. Here's what most people miss. The solution isn't trying harder to be conscious. It's learning to recognize what creates mental clarity versus what creates mental noise, then making gentle adjustments that support your natural awareness capacity. This might mean reducing information overload that fragments your attention. It might mean creating buffer time between activities so your mind isn't constantly rushing from one thing to another. It might mean establishing boundaries with people or situations that consistently leave you feeling scattered or reactive. The beautiful truth is that consciousness doesn't require effort to maintain. It requires the right conditions to emerge. When you stop fighting against autopilot and start creating conditions that support natural awareness, presence becomes as effortless as seeing when you open your eyes in a well-lit room. This is why forced mindfulness techniques often fail long-term. They're trying to create consciousness through effort, rather than removing the obstacles that prevent consciousness from flowing naturally. When you address the root conditions that support or interfere with awareness, presence becomes sustainable and enjoyable rather than exhausting and artificial.
The most profound shift happens when you realize that you don't need to learn how to be conscious. You need to unlearn the habits and patterns that are keeping you unconscious. You don't need to acquire awareness, you need to remove what's blocking the awareness that's already there. This understanding completely transforms your approach to breaking autopilot. Instead of adding more monitoring, more effort, more techniques to your life, you begin removing what's creating unconsciousness. Instead of forcing presence, you create space for presence to emerge naturally. When you work with your mind's natural intelligence in this way, conscious living stops feeling like a constant battle against unconscious patterns and starts feeling like coming home to your authentic way of being in the world. The natural way. Now that you understand the principle, let's explore how to create the optimal conditions for natural consciousness to emerge while allowing autopilot to function appropriately in areas where it genuinely serves you. Conscious environment design. The foundation of natural awareness is creating external and internal environments that support clarity rather than confusion, presence rather than fragmentation. Most people underestimate how dramatically environment affects consciousness, trying to force awareness in conditions that make presence nearly impossible. Your physical environment has enormous impact on your mental state and awareness capacity. Cluttered, chaotic, or overstimulating spaces tend to create mental fragmentation and unconscious reactivity. Clean, organized, and aesthetically pleasing environments naturally support mental clarity and conscious choice. This doesn't mean your environment needs to be perfect or expensive. It means being intentional about creating spaces that feel calm and supportive rather than overwhelming or distracting. Notice which environments naturally enhance your awareness and which tend to scatter your attention, then make adjustments that support your consciousness goals. Your information environment is equally important. Constant notifications, news feeds, and digital stimulation create mental noise that makes natural presence difficult to maintain. Consider creating boundaries around information consumption that allow your mind to settle into natural awareness rather than constantly reacting to external input. The people you spend time with also significantly influence your consciousness level. Some relationships naturally call forth your awareness, presence, and authentic response. Others tend to trigger automatic patterns, reactive behavior, or unconscious role-playing. While you can't control others' behavior, you can make conscious choices about how much time you spend in different relational environments. Your schedule and pace of life profoundly affect your capacity for presence. Rushing from one activity to another, overpacking your days, and maintaining constant busyness create conditions where autopilot becomes necessary for basic functioning. Creating buffer time, reducing unnecessary commitments, and allowing natural rhythms supports conscious choice and awareness. Begin noticing which aspects of your environment support natural consciousness and which create mental fragmentation.
Make gentle adjustments that honor your awareness goals while remaining practical and sustainable for your actual life circumstances. Attention training. The second foundation involves developing your natural attention capacity rather than forcing focus through willpower. Most people approach attention training like they're trying to control a wild animal rather than working with the mind's natural intelligence.
Your attention is naturally curious, creative, and intelligent. When you work with these natural qualities rather than against them, developing sustained focus becomes enjoyable rather than effortful. The key is learning to guide attention gently rather than forcing it harshly. Start with activities that naturally engage your attention in positive ways. This might be reading material that genuinely interests you, engaging in creative projects that feel meaningful, or spending time in nature where your attention can rest and restore naturally. These experiences help you remember what natural focus feels like when it's not forced or fragmented. Practice what I call gentle focus during routine activities. Instead of trying to maintain intense concentration, simply return your attention to your current activity when you notice it has wandered. This isn't about perfect focus, it's about developing a friendly relationship with your attention that supports natural presence. Notice the difference between concentration and awareness. Concentration involves narrowing focus to exclude everything except a chosen object. Awareness involves open, spacious attention that can include multiple experiences simultaneously. Both have their place, but awareness tends to be more sustainable and pleasant for daily life. Develop the ability to consciously choose where to place your attention rather than having it constantly pulled by external stimuli or internal reactivity. This isn't about rigid control, it's about developing the capacity to make conscious choices about what deserves your mental energy and focus. As your attention becomes more stable and responsive, you'll naturally notice when you're operating consciously versus when you've slipped into autopilot. This awareness itself is often enough to gently shift back into conscious mode without force or self-criticism. Intentional rhythm creation. The third foundation involves establishing life rhythms that support natural consciousness, rather than forcing awareness into unsustainable patterns. Most people try to be constantly conscious, which is both impossible and counterproductive. Your mind naturally moves through cycles of focused attention and diffuse processing, conscious engagement and automatic functioning, active participation and restorative rest. When you honor these natural rhythms rather than fighting against them, consciousness becomes much more sustainable and enjoyable. Create conscious rituals that mark transitions between different activities or parts of your day. This might be taking 3 conscious breaths before starting work, pausing to set an intention before important conversations, or spending a few moments appreciating your environment when you arrive somewhere new. These transition moments serve as gentle reminders to shift from autopilot into conscious mode when awareness would be valuable. They're not forced interruptions, but natural pause points that help you consciously choose how to engage with upcoming activities. Establish periods of deliberate rest where you allow your mind to process and integrate experiences without trying to be consciously aware of anything. This might be time spent in nature, gentle movement, or simply sitting quietly without agenda. These rest periods actually support consciousness during active periods by preventing mental overload. Notice your natural energy rhythms and honor them in your awareness practice. Some people are naturally more conscious in the morning, others in the evening. Some find awareness easier during physical activity, others during stillness. Work with your authentic patterns rather than forcing awareness according to external schedules or expectations. The goal is creating a sustainable rhythm that includes both conscious engagement and appropriate automatic functioning, both focused attention and restorative rest. This rhythm should feel natural and energizing rather than forced and depleting. The fourth foundation involves developing the capacity to consciously choose your responses rather than automatically reacting to life circumstances. This is where breaking autopilot becomes most practical and transformative.
Most automatic responses developed as intelligent adaptations to past situations, but they may no longer serve your current circumstances or growth goals. The key isn't trying to eliminate automatic responses, but learning to consciously evaluate whether they're still appropriate and beneficial. Begin noticing the gap between stimulus and response, the brief moment where choice is possible before automatic patterns take over. This gap might be very small at first, but with gentle attention, it naturally expands, creating more space for conscious choice. During this gap, you can ask simple questions. How do I want to respond to this situation? What response would align with my values and goals? What would serve everyone involved, including myself? These aren't elaborate analyses processes, they're quick conscious check-ins that can redirect automatic patterns when needed. Practice conscious response in low-stakes situations before attempting it during high-stress moments. Notice your automatic patterns during routine interactions, daily decision-making, and minor challenges. As you develop skill with conscious choice in easier situations, it becomes more available during difficult circumstances. Remember that choosing to respond automatically can itself be a conscious choice. The goal isn't eliminating all automatic functioning, but developing the capacity to choose when consciousness is valuable and when autopilot appropriately serves efficiency and ease. Develop self-compassion for times when you notice you've responded automatically in ways you would have preferred to handle consciously. This awareness without self-judgment actually accelerates the development of conscious choice capacity more than criticism and forced control attempts. Embodied awareness. As you consistently apply these foundations, something beautiful begins to happen. Conscious living stops feeling like a practice you do and starts feeling like who you naturally are. The boundaries between conscious moments and automatic functioning become more fluid and appropriate rather than rigid and effortful. Integrated presence. True liberation from autopilot doesn't mean constant conscious control over every moment. It means developing the capacity to move fluidly between conscious awareness and appropriate automatic functioning based on what each situation actually requires. This integrated presence shows up as natural responsiveness to life rather than reactive patterns. You find yourself automatically responding from wisdom and intention rather than from old conditioning and unconscious habits. The automation itself becomes more conscious and aligned with your authentic values and goals. You might notice that you naturally pause before speaking when emotions are high, automatically choose nourishing foods when you're hungry, or spontaneously express appreciation when you feel it. These responses feel automatic, but they're arising from conscious conditioning rather than unconscious patterns. This level of integration often develops so gradually that you don't notice the transformation until someone comments on how present and responsive you've become, or until you realize you're naturally handling situations that used to trigger automatic reactivity with conscious choice and skillful response. The practice becomes less about monitoring consciousness and more about living from a place of natural awareness that expresses itself appropriately in each moment. You're not trying to be conscious, you're simply allowing consciousness to function naturally through your daily life. Authentic expression. As autopilot patterns that don't serve you naturally dissolve, your authentic personality and natural responses begin emerging more freely. You discover aspects of yourself that were hidden beneath layers of automatic social conditioning and reactive patterns. This authentic expression feels both familiar and new. Familiar because it's genuinely you, but new because you may not have experienced this level of natural self-expression since childhood, before social conditioning created automatic patterns of behavior designed to fit in or please others. People often report feeling more creative, spontaneous, and genuinely connected to others as their automatic patterns become more conscious and aligned. They're not trying to be different, they're simply removing the obstacles that were preventing their natural personality from expressing itself freely. This authenticity makes relationships more satisfying because you're responding from genuine feeling and intention rather than from automatic social scripts. Work becomes more fulfilling because you're making choices based on actual values and interests rather than unconscious programming about what you should do. The beautiful paradox is that as you become more authentically yourself, you often become more considerate and skillful in your interactions with others. Consciousness naturally includes awareness of impact and interconnection, leading to responses that serve both your authentic expression and the well-being of others. Effortless navigation. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of integrated conscious living is that it begins to feel effortless. You're not constantly monitoring your awareness or forcing consciousness, you're simply living from a place of natural presence that responds appropriately to whatever arises. This effortless quality emerges because you're working with your mind's natural intelligence rather than against it. Consciousness becomes as natural as breathing, happening automatically without forced attention, but available for conscious participation when needed. Decision-making becomes clearer and more efficient because you're responding from genuine preference and wisdom rather than from conflicting automatic patterns or external pressures. You naturally know what feels right, what serves your well-being, and what aligns with your authentic values. Challenges and difficulties don't disappear, but your relationship to them transforms completely. Instead of automatically reacting with stress, resistance, or overwhelm, you find yourself naturally responding with curiosity, creativity, and appropriate action. The problems may be the same, but your consciousness transforms how you experience and handle them. This effortless navigation often feels like life is supporting your growth and expression, rather than constantly testing your ability to stay conscious. Opportunities align with your interests, relationships become more harmonious, and daily life feels more meaningful and satisfying. Continuous evolution. The most beautiful aspect of liberated consciousness is that it supports continuous growth and evolution without the effort and struggle that characterize forced personal development approaches. Changes happen naturally as awareness illuminates areas that are ready for transformation. This organic evolution feels more like unfolding than forcing, more like discovery than discipline. You notice outdated patterns, beliefs, or behaviors with curiosity rather than judgment, and they often dissolve naturally without intense efforts or dramatic intervention.
Your capacity for consciousness itself continues developing, allowing you to remain present and responsive in increasingly complex and challenging situations. This isn't about becoming perfect or eliminating all automatic responses. It's about developing the flexibility to meet life from awareness rather than reactivity. The growth becomes sustainable because it's based on natural intelligence rather than willpower. Changes that emerge from consciousness feel authentic and aligned rather than forced or artificial, making them more likely to integrate permanently into your way of being. You might find yourself naturally drawn to experiences, relationships, and opportunities that support further consciousness development. Your liberated awareness seems to attract conditions that enhance rather than diminish your capacity for present, authentic living. Contribution and service. As conscious living becomes natural, many people discover that their increased presence and authenticity naturally enhances their capacity to contribute meaningfully to others and the world. This service emerges organically from overflow rather than from obligation or forced effort. Your natural presence creates space for others to feel seen, heard, and valued in ways that forced attention never could. People often report feeling more comfortable and authentic around someone who is genuinely present versus someone who is trying hard to be present. The clarity and wisdom that develop through conscious living often lead to insights and innovations that benefit others. When you're responding from awareness rather than automatic patterns, your natural creativity and intelligence have more space to express themselves in beneficial ways. This contribution doesn't require sacrificing your own well-being or authentic expression. In fact, the more genuine and present you become, the more naturally you tend to make choices that serve both your own flourishing and the well-being of others. Many people find that their work, relationships, and creative expression become vehicles for service rather than just personal achievement. The consciousness that liberated them from autopilot naturally wants to express itself in ways that support the consciousness and well-being of others.
The beautiful paradox is that this service emerges from fullness rather than emptiness, from natural expression rather than forced sacrifice. You're not trying to help others, you're simply being yourself so authentically that your natural gifts and caring naturally benefit the people and situations you encounter. This is how breaking autopilot ultimately transforms not just your personal experience, but your capacity to contribute to the larger unfolding of consciousness and well-being in the world. When you're living from natural awareness rather than unconscious patterns, everything you touch tends to become more conscious, more authentic, and more alive. Living freedom. The ultimate goal of breaking autopilot isn't perfect consciousness or complete control over your responses. It's developing the freedom to live authentically and responsibly rather than being trapped in unconscious patterns that don't serve your growth or contribution. This freedom shows up as increased choice in how you respond to life circumstances, greater alignment between your actions and your values, and more satisfaction and meaning in your daily experience. You're not trying to be different, you're simply removing the obstacles that were preventing your natural intelligence and authenticity from expressing themselves freely.
The journey of breaking autopilot reveals that consciousness isn't something you need to achieve or maintain through effort. It's your natural state that emerges when you create conditions that support awareness and remove the patterns that maintain unconsciousness. Most importantly, this liberation becomes a gift you naturally share with others through your presence, authenticity, and conscious response to life. Your freedom from autopilot creates space for others to remember their own natural consciousness and authentic way of being. This is how we transform from unconscious functioning to conscious living, not through force or constant monitoring, but through understanding our mind's natural intelligence and creating conditions that support our inherent capacity for awareness, choice, and authentic expression in each moment of our lives. When consciousness becomes this integrated and natural, you realize that you weren't broken or unconscious in any fundamental way. You simply had patterns and conditions that were maintaining unconsciousness. Once you understand how to work skillfully with your mind's natural intelligence, your authentic awareness can finally function freely, transforming not just your personal experience, but contributing to the larger awakening of consciousness in our world.